show was made possible with the continued support of Online Casino Share. Hello, people, and welcome to APCW Perspectives. You know, I've been doing this show for nearly 15 years, and in all that time, I've seen lies, theft, stupidity, and ignorance on a monumental scale. But in all those years, never have I ever seen such a cavalier, arrogant, self-serving sack of shit as this little turd right here. Lord Foster of Bath, chair of the UK's Peers for Gambling Reform. But don't be fooled. There's nothing reformist about this group or their leader. 2 weeks ago, I told you about several reforms put forth by this troop of poo-slinging primates. Reforms which outlined affordability checks, stake limits, and a reduction in the speed of gameplay, all supposedly in order to protect those with gambling problems. Reforms which Lord Foster openly admits will cost the industry between 700 and 975 million pounds in profits per year. But wait a damn minute, those numbers only apply to 4 of the biggest operators and the National Lottery. Turns out they don't apply to the industry as a whole. And Lord Foster says that the actual cost will be, quote, significantly higher. Then he added, quite matter-of-factly, that the operators, quote, may still make a profit. They may. Well, thanks a lot, dick. Now consider this. The UK's gross gambling yield was approximately 14.2 billion pounds last year. That's before operating expenses are removed. Actual profits then would be lower. But even if we use the higher figure of 14.2 billion and the conservative estimate that these changes will only cost 975 million, that's still nearly a 7% hit to the bottom line. But to quote Lord Foster, the actual cost may be significantly higher. Now, stay with me here. The rate of gambling addiction in the United Kingdom is approximately 0.5%. So perhaps Mr. Foster could take a moment out of his day and descend his ivory tower just long enough to explain to us peasants how a 0.5% problem justifies his 7% solution. Much more on this little scumbag right after the break. Welcome back. You know, very rarely do we devote an entire program to just one asshole. But in our second half, we continue our discussion on the chair of the House of Lords, Peers for Gambling Reform Group, Lord Foster of Bath. And friends, please stay with me because we're not even to the scary part yet. Now, I'm not the only one taking verbal shots at this little weasel but I am the only one recommending that he get back on his medications as soon as possible. Leaders at the Betting and Gaming Council called Mr. Foster's and the group's suggestions foolish and fantasy, comments which Foster took issue with. Notice, however, that he didn't have the balls to respond to my video. Foster said that his suggestions were not fantasy. Well, okay, well that settles it then. And Foster challenged the Betting and Gaming Council to prove they were fantasy. But as usual, Foster's senility was kicking in, because obviously the Betting and Gaming Council did not mean that the Lord's suggestions were impossible to implement. They simply meant that if they were to be implemented, it was fantasy to think that the industry would survive. At least, survive as we know it. And maybe that's the Lord's goal here, to castrate the gambling industry. After all, Mr. Foster admits his changes will result not only in a loss of income, but a loss of people's jobs as well. But he doesn't care, as long as he gets what he wants. But the scary part, the really scary part here, is what this little said next. That, and I'm quoting here, there were quite a number of gambling reforms which could be introduced without the need for primary legislation. Let me translate that for you. What he means is, he's just fine with regulatory changes being put into action right now without all the fuss of actually being debated, discussed, and passed by Parliament. What does that say about Lord Foster? And he is urging the government to implement changes without waiting for the Gambling Act review to be completed. What does that say about this little shit? Personally, this is just me. Personally, I think that somewhere in the British countryside right now, there's an asylum missing a patient. As for me, I'm just gonna go home and drink heavily to try to block this out of my mind. If you're in the area, please feel free to join me. And next week I'll be back for more insanity, God willing. Now consider this. The UK's gross gaming yield, damn it, it's the gross gambling yield. Well, if you're gonna have to have a blooper, you might as well have it right there. You know, very rarely do we devote an entire episode to just one person, but there's another one. That operators should, after his recommendations go into effect, damn it. Well, I'm just batting a freaking 1,000, aren't I?